Would you like to begin a series of strategies that will propel you into achieving personal mastery? Do you desire to have breakthroughs in unlocking your potential? Do you seek to live a life that is full of joy, peace, and happiness? Each week, join Charles and Demetrius as they share tools and strategies that will help you take control of your life so you can live a life of peace, joy, and abundance. Now, here are your hosts, Charles and Demetrius.
And welcome back to another exciting episode of Inner Success Radio. This is Chuck and Demetrius for another exciting episode of Inner Success Radio. Be sure to subscribe on iHeartRadio as well as iTunes. And also be sure to drop us a comment over on Facebook as well. We have a very special guest with us today, Bob. And Bob's last name is pronounced Choat.
Choat.
Bob Choat. Bob Choat. Bob, so before we get into today's interview, we'll go ahead and throw the question of the day over at Demetrius.
All right, let's go. Chuck and Bob, the question that we're going to go with today, I guess it's a little bit random, but let's go with, what's the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten? What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten, Chuck?
That's a good one. And I would say, I'm going to say weird because I didn't know I was eating it until I was done. So I went to this church function, and this was like several years ago. I went to a church function. They had all types of food there. They had steak, or what appeared to be steak, chicken, seafood. They had to work. So we're wrapping up from the event. Everybody's eating, and we're just all sitting around talking. And for some reason, one of the pastors asked me, he said, "Charles, do you know what you just ate?" I'm like, "Yeah, I had me some steak and some chicken and some seafood." Like, "No, that was deer." I'm like, "What? Deer?" I'm like, okay. I didn't, but it looks just like steak. Like, it was the way they had it cooked, and it was browned and everything. I was like, "Wow, okay, that's interesting." So I'm saying weird because I didn't know I was eating deer until it was over.
Was it good?
It was.
Well, you gotta come further south, Chuck. That is a lot of people eat deer out here. It's kind of weird. I didn't know it up north, but people eat deer burgers, deer sandwiches, all type of deer. That's good. I've never had it before, but good for you. All right, so let's go over to you, Bob. Bob, what is the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten?
Well, it's not deer because I've had venison quite a bit and a lot of other types, from rattlesnakes to even lizards. But those aren't weird.
Wait a minute. Those aren't weird. Those are weird to me. But you got something more weird?
Yes, I do.
Oh no.
Yes. When I was in the Marines, I was overseas and went into a restaurant there, and I could not read the menu, so I ordered some food and looked at the meat, and then I started eating it. Then I started smelling like dog around, and I said, "Are there dogs here?" And they said, "Well, you're eating dog."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, I guess the same question I have to ask is, was it good?
It freaked me out. Let's just say that, because I'm such a big lover of dogs, and it just unless I was really starving and had to, it's just, again, because I talk a lot about mindset and everything. And at that time, I just didn't have the right mindset, versus the people there who thought eating dog was normal. Eating a lot of stuff was normal. Whereas here in the United States, much different.
Wow. I was wondering where you were going to go with that, Bob, because you said rattlesnake and lizard. And I know Chuck was like, wait, what? What could be worse than that? So, all right, so dog. So we got Chuck with deer. We're not going to count Bob's rattlesnake and lizard. We'll count his dog, though, in the Marines, okay? And mine is nothing compared to both of these. I had frog legs, A few years back, it was like a delicacy at this nice restaurant. My buddy just forced me. He's like, you have to have it, but you have to have it. It has to be seared. See, Demetrius, you got to get it seared. And I was like, wait, I never heard seared before. You know what? Let's go with some seared frog legs. And I'll tell you this, guys. I wouldn't eat it now. However, if you eat meat, you should definitely try seared frog legs. The key word there is seared from what I've learned. All right. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Chuck, so we can get this thing going.
All right. Awesome.
Before we get going, let me ask you, Rocky Mountain oysters. Have either of you had Rocky Mountain oysters?
Never.
No, but you said the word oysters, Bob, and I don't even like regular oysters. I can't even look at them. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
I'm sure there's going to be a listener who knows what I'm talking about Rocky Mountain oysters. And if you ever get a chance, without Googling it, if you come across a restaurant that serves it, because they do it, especially in southern areas, in other areas in the Midwest, I know, some areas, that they serve Rocky Mountain oysters.
I'm going to have to. Yeah, I love oysters, so I'm going to definitely look into it. Now,
I'm going to have to take you both out to a restaurant that serves Rocky Mountain oysters.
I just wrote it down on my notes. So.
Now, but before we get into this, I hate to do this. We don't normally do it, but I just picked up on something that was like, it's really big for me. It may be a small thing, but you just said without Googling it. I have this thing, and I'm about mindset as well. But I'm curious to know, why did you choose to say without Googling it?
Because that's typically when I ask a question, a lot of people will go and tend to Google something that they don't know, which is fine and dandy. If it's looking for a particular answer that may be challenging to them, so they can go and they can use Google as a starting point to find out the answer. And what I asked both of you is pretty simple in terms of like Rocky Mountain oysters, yet it's something that's also strange too, because when, it's like, because you're both thinking oysters, and then I mentioned also Rocky Mountain, and are there oysters in the Rocky Mountains?
Yeah, that definitely does put it in a different context when you added in the Rocky Mountain. When you said oysters, I'm like, oh, we know what oysters are, but then when you said Rocky Mountain oysters, that's immediately, all right, well, this must be something a little slightly different than just regular oysters.
So chances are, especially when I say Rocky Mountain oysters, it maybe has a curiosity. Says, maybe I'm going to go and Google what Bob just said.
Mm-hmm.
I love this interview already. Thank you for that, man. That was awesome.
All right, Bob. So before we get into the interview, it's going to just read a quick bio on you. I won't read everything, but just because you have some very interesting background, I just want people to know what we're about to get into. Bob Choat is passionate about health and fitness that's integrated with peak performance mindset. With a background in the martial arts, having earned a 5th degree black belt in Kempo Karate and a senior instructor in Jeet Kune Do. Is that
Jeet Kune Do, which is the system founded by Bruce Lee.
Oh, Jeet Kune Do. I need to keep that in mind. And you also served in the U.S. Marine Corps and as well as the LAPD. And
yes.
You also integrated into your experience and taught mind-body peak performance. We know that you have a PhD in psychology. You studied CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. You also studied rational emotive behavioral therapy, and you're also certified in NLP. So it's a lot of stuff, and we know that you have a very extensive background. But one of the things that we're always interested in is people's journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the martial arts, because I think everything that I do, martial arts is my basis. It started with my mother, of all people, as being my first martial arts instructor, starting me at 18 months old, where she put a stick in my hand, was teaching me kendo, which she learned from her two older brothers when she was living in Japan. Mm-hmm. And both my uncles served in World War II, and one was actually killed in the Philippines. Yet my mom wanted to instill in me, starting from as young as possible, the attitude of a warrior that can keep moving forward. And so from that, then I lived in Okinawa for like 3 years when I was a kid, from 5 to 8, and studied Goju there. And then I studied a lot of others and went into a lot of other sports as well. Because one thing that I was really challenged in wasn't in sports, it wasn't the physical aspects. It was actually more of the belief in myself as a person. And part of my story is that my father was very abusive. He used to beat me up, and my mom was just the opposite. She would try to build me up. And the conflict there caused me to be a stutterer. And I actually stuttered up until into my adulthood. So I had all these aspects, and my father would call me stupid and dumb. And then on top of that, I remember being given an IQ test at age 5 because my dad thought there was something wrong with me. My teachers thought there was something wrong with me. I took the IQ test, and it turned out that I was a moron, which back in those days, they used to give diagnostic labels like that, like moron, which is having an IQ of 70 or less. So I carried that with me through school, was introduced in different classes as a moron. And then when I was living on my grandparents' farm in the Ozarks, I ended up getting injured, had a scar on my forehead that went from like the middle of my forehead all the way up into my head. And then going to school. So here I was a moron, and I looked like Frankenstein's monster. So it was crazy. So I carried this image of myself for many years, and the development within myself was that. So I stuttered, I was stupid, and I looked like Frankenstein's monster. So you can imagine that image, other than in sports, and me dealing with people and being able to talk and everything else. So I made it a concerted effort once I reached my adulthood to, yes, have that part, but yet challenge myself to get in front of audiences. Now, this was like many years later. It wasn't right away. Even when I was with the LAPD, I still had those issues. Even when I was in the Marines, I still had a lot of those issues. Mm-hmm. Even when I was building up businesses, I couldn't get on stage in front of an audience. So my very first engagement, I had that fear like everybody else, and I challenged myself and challenged my own beliefs, my mindset regarding that. And then my very first time, and I don't know if you, Charles or Demetrius, if you've been on stage in the very first time, and you had that fear, the butterflies, and your face getting flushed, and maybe everything else. Have you had that?
Still do.
Yeah.
Still do. Okay. So that was my greatest fear. It wasn't getting shot at. It wasn't even the fear of heights or jumping out of planes or anything like that. It was that. That was my greatest fear, was that audience. And the perception that I thought that people had of me. And I was that person that I had to get out. I had to get rid of that part and unleash myself. So yes, I got up there the first time, and it was weird because I got a standing ovation and I thought I did really bad. So from there, I started seeking out more speaking engagements. And it got to the point, even to this day, that you get me in front of an audience, it doesn't matter where it's at, I now crave it. So I went from my greatest fear to my greatest passion. I mean, there's not a stage, I don't care how small or how big, I will be in front of it. And it's now fun for me, it's play. So wouldn't you like to have that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah, and I have a program. It's funny you're talking about speaking. I have a program called the 10 Commandments of Becoming a Masterful Communicator and Public Speaker. Mm-hmm. And one of them on there is actually, are you familiar with Jim Rohn? I know you're big on mindset.
Yes, in fact, one of my good friends, because I actually met Jim.
Oh my good, you met him?
Yeah, years ago.
That's a round of applause.
Yeah,
right there.
so
that's good. That's good.
so my good friend Kyle Wilson used to handle Jim Rohn.
Do you remember the part where he was talking about? It sounds similar to your story and every other speaker I know's story. Is he was talking about he was so bad. You know, the first time that he ever did a speech, he said if he wasn't doing the speech, he would have went home. And he said, but you know how I got better? He said, I got better because I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I did it again. You was talking about challenging your mindset, and what you was just talking about. You was talking about challenging your mindset. Could you go just peel another layer behind that? I know where you're headed with it, but there's a lot of our listeners that don't understand that sometimes we must challenge our own mindset. We heard how you challenged your mindset, but could you break that down to the maybe the aspiring entrepreneur out there?
Yes. So let's go into, because we know about Carol Dweck's aspect that she, where she has her TED Talks and she wrote a book on mindset. And she talks about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, which most people have a fixed mindset instead of a growth. Growth is where you want to learn and you want to challenge yourself and you want to grow. And again, people can look it up on TED Talk if they have not heard about Carol Dweck and mindset. I'm going to go into a different way and talk about 3 mindsets. And in these 3 mindsets, it starts with implanted mindset, imprinted mindset, and inspired mindset. And the implanted mindset is the mindset that, like with my father, like parents in our educational system and those closest to us, they will tell us about ourselves. They will basically implant or make suggestions when we're really young on who we are. And we start to believe that. And because of that, we carry that forward. And then they'll set up rules and regulations in terms of our own life. And by the way, there's stages of growth which this fits in perfectly with, whereas we go through the first stage of growth, and that's like when we're that baby and we're starting to learn about the world around us and everything else like that. Then we go into the second stage of growth, where now we start to see how we fit in to the world around us. Then the third stage of growth is when we're being able to have more of an ego and developing that part. And then a 4th stage of growth, and then 4th stage, this is very critical. This is between 7 and 11 years old. And this is where we start to learn about rules and regulations taught to us by our parents, our educational system, on what we can and can't do and everything like that. The 5th stage of growth, and this is where we start challenging the rules. This is when we're teenagers. And if you think about it, and this is a very critical period, when we challenge the rules that govern us. So what our schools tell us, what our parents tells us, and we tend to get in trouble as teenagers, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Because, and this is very important when I go back into the adulthood. So as we go through and we challenge all these rules and regulations, then when we graduate from high school, we get into the real world as adults. What's out there? More rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
More regulations. If we go to work for a company, they're set up with a lot of rules. There's rules, more rules in colleges. So, and where did I say, what stage were the rules developed?
7 to 11.
7 to 11. So average of 9, right?
Yep.
So what stage of development was that?
Wow.
The fourth stage, right? So what happens is we were in a fifth stage of development. When we go, we become adults. We're being knocked back down to the fourth stage of development, basically 9 years old.
Wow.
So we go through the rest of our life living at 9 years old. 9 years old until we hit, there's a period of time like in our 40s, even in our 50s, when people go through what's called a midlife crisis. A midlife crisis is when we look back on our life and we start looking and seeing, oh my gosh, what the heck? You know, I followed all the rules, everything, and it didn't work out, right? You know, I'm going to drive this. I'm a guy. I'm going to go get my sports car. I need to challenge stuff. So where did this typically happen before? In the teen years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason people say, "Oh, you're going through a midlife crisis. You're acting like a teenager." Yes, you're in the fifth stage of development, of growth that you missed out on because you went right back to age 9 years old, and now you're finally getting it. Now a lot of people don't, and they go, and they're still stuck in stage 4. This is a reason that parents have conflicts with their teenage kids, because the parents are following the rules and regulations in the stage 4, and their teenagers are in stage 5.
I've never heard it broken down.
That's so true.
That was better than what Earl Nightingale would do. I like that. That was really good.
Well, guess what? Most of your listeners are entrepreneurs,
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurs are they're either in a stage 5 or stage 6 level of development. That's when people handle entrepreneurs. It's crazy. It's because entrepreneurs are always challenging the rules and regulations of life. And let's go back to the mindset. So we have the implanted mindset that was, boom, put in there and everything like that. And then some of us are able to grow out of it and challenge those aspects like I did with what my father did to me. So the imprinted mindset are those people who become our mentors and our coaches and people like that. So they come into our life, and now they will provide us with a mindset to help us to grow. And entrepreneurs, I know there's a lot that will have certain mentors. You mentioned Jim Rohn. Well, Jim Rohn, he had his mentor,
Earl Choat,
right? Yes.
Yeah.
And who did Jim Rohn mentor?
Tony Robbins and
Tony
many
Robbins,
others, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so Tony Robbins, he became a mentor to many, many other people. I know that Brendan Burchard was also mentored by Tony Robbins directly and indirectly. And it's this continuing cycle of these kind of people going out there and mentoring and having been mentored. So it's important for an entrepreneur to get mentors. If you're not there yet, especially if you're a young entrepreneur, then find those mentors who's been where you're at. And they're going to challenge you and challenge you to grow. And the other mindset is the inspired mindset. And the inspired mindset is exactly what it means. It means you're inspired to do something greater than yourself. And especially as an entrepreneur, because I know I've talked to a lot of people who are wannabe entrepreneurs, and they tell me that they have two goals. They want more power and they want money. Well, I tell them, what are you inspired to really do? What is your reason why? What is your mission? Well, they don't know. They're going into starting something because they want to make more money. And the inspired mindset, they're not thinking about the money. Money's only a metric to show them how well that they're doing. And it's not about the power. Because when you have an inspired mindset, you're going to influence a lot more people. And that's basically true power. But you're not seeking power. You're not seeking money. Those are only offshoots of how well that you're doing. So having an inspired mindset is probably the most powerful because you're inspiring. You're inspiring yourself. And when you inspire yourself and when you're taking the actions necessary to fulfill that mission that you're on, then it doesn't matter where you're at. Because as you know, being an entrepreneur is a struggle. Because I know that I've been there. Many other entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, have been there. There's a lot more downs, especially at the beginning, than there are ups. You're struggling. I mean, you're trying to find out when your next meal is going to come, or if you have enough money to make certain payments and everything. So those are some of the things. If you focus on money, then chances are you're going to get out. And I tell people, if that's all you're focused on, then don't be an entrepreneur. You don't have the right mindset for it. You're not inspired. Go find a job that will pay you more money than what you're making right now. But if you're inspired, you're going to get through those down times. And you're going to be working. You're going to be working a lot of hours. You're going to be working hard. But you're going to be working not hard where it's like destroying you, because it's more fun. And I don't know about you and Charles and Demetrius, and in terms of what you're doing, are you inspired? Is it a mission?
You can go, Choat.
Yeah, definitely. Without a doubt. This is definitely, like we don't get any money from this, from doing the podcast. We bring people on, we share content. We actually just put on an event last weekend in New Jersey where we came out of pocket. It was a free event for people to attend. Mm-hmm. And, we came out of pocket because this is the work that we're both inspired to do. Demetrius and myself, we love inspiring. We love encouraging people. So yeah, this particular work, this podcast is definitely through inspiration.
Good.
Now, on the back end, of course, we would hope to eventually generate revenue from it, but
we will. We're not hoping anymore. We will monetize on this.
Yeah. But we have to put the work in first.
You should monetize it, because when you're able to raise that metric, you can affect a lot more people.
Yeah.
And even in a much bigger way. And by the way, which part of Jersey?
We were in Linden.
Okay. Yeah. When I was a kid, I actually lived in Seabright for a short time, which is right there on the coast.
Okay. I'm originally from Cherry Hill. That's where South Jersey.
Ah, okay. But you guys don't sound like you're from Jersey.
No,
I never did. I never did.
Yeah, I'm from Buffalo, living in Baltimore.
Okay. And Demetrius, because at times I heard there was some Southern drawl there or something.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
I'm in the Carolinas.
You're in the Carolinas. Okay.
Yeah. Home of the boiled peanuts.
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. Awesome. So, Bob, I wanted to recircle back to a point in your story where you were talking about your stuttering and some of the challenges you had growing up, because the context of your story seems like that's although it's not always out there, it seemed like that happens, right? People have troubling homes. When they're coming up through school, they're labeled by their friends, by their teachers, by their peers. And me personally, I battled, and I'm still battling with something. So I started myself, Bob, as well. Mm-hmm. I had to go see a speech therapist. That didn't help. So it was to the point where, my conversations were a challenge when I'm talking to somebody one-on-one. But, now here I'm today, on a podcast talking. I've spoken at events, did Toastmasters, and you're right. Like the more you do it, the easier it becomes, right? And then the other thing that I have is I have epilepsy, and I also have a skin condition called neurofibromatosis.
Okay.
Right. So I had those three challenges alone, outside of the fact that sometimes coming up through my household, my mother was abused by my stepfather. So it was one of those things like, wow, you're seeing all that as a kid, plus you're dealing with all these health challenges. How does somebody overcome that? So the question that I had for you is, and you said that your mother was there as an uplifter for you, as an encourager for you. Mm-hmm. Because it just doesn't happen, right? Like when you realize that, hey, this mindset, I have to get out of this mindset I am if I want to achieve what I want to achieve. Was there a particular point where that light bulb clicked on for you?
I think because, I had a lot of mentors, especially my martial arts instructors, my mom being one and others, yet it didn't click on at that point. Mm-hmm. And it didn't click on when I was younger. It didn't click on even when because sports was like my way out. I mean, all the way through, high school and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember one time when I was in high school trying to ask this one girl out on a date, and I stuttered so bad that I basically passed out. And she felt sorry for me, so she asked me out. And that's the ultimate like embarrassing thing. Here I was a sports star, and yet I could not ask this girl that I liked out. And even though the physical aspect, whether I was in the Marines or as a police officer, and I was able to put on that mask and became, in a sense, that kind of hero, it wasn't me. And I wore these masks, and I realized that, something had to change. And it wasn't until like years and years later, even after I was running my business and everything, for me to get out and look at myself and take a real look, instead of letting my ego get in the way, because, we tend to protect that ego, and we have that certain perception of ourselves, instead of stepping out of that and being realistic, using what is referred to as our inner CEO, which is our prefrontal cortex. And I didn't realize it until, I looked at myself in a different light by not being in myself, but being outside. And I didn't believe what people told me about myself. That the way I looked and how my voice sounded, like they liked my voice, and that I was a really good speaker when I did speak. And then I said, I'm going to have to step outside and look at myself as best I can in an objective way. And then I started using a lot of, like when I studied hypnosis and NLP and a lot of those things, and eventually becoming an NLP trainer, and then adding psychology and everything else. And once I got that, I started seeing myself not raising myself up on a pedestal, because I would never do that, yet saying, I have, these imperfections. So what? I've come to love my imperfections. And I told you about the scar on my forehead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I noticed that my scar it's still there, but it's almost like disappeared. Now I kind of miss it. And I kind of miss a lot of them. I didn't tell you about, also when I was a kid, I was on my grandparents' farm, the same farm, where I had the scar on my forehead, on my thigh and my leg. And this is where I could not go swimming for a long time or show my legs. I remember my grandmother, she was cooking on a stove, had a pan full of grease, and I got close to the stove and accidentally knocked the grease onto my leg and my thigh. So I ended up with third-degree burns there. I had a huge scar. And that stayed with me for a long time. So I wore pants and I wasn't able to go show myself. So that was kind of embarrassing. Yet, even that scar, I kind of miss. So it's crazy. I accepted my imperfections. And I think when we start accepting that we're not perfect and that nobody is perfect. And when I realized this, and when I started coaching CEOs, and it's crazy, and with executives and CEOs and people in Hollywood and models and sports stars and everything else, when I was coaching a lot of these people, well, guess what? Every single one of them have issues. And I realized another thing as a speaker and presenter, because when I was in the audience, I was the same, before I started speaking, I was listening to the speakers speak, and then they would turn and they would look at me. Well, that also had the same kind of, like, my heart would start pounding, because I would think, well, what are they thinking about me down here in the audience? Maybe, I would shrink up or something like that. Yet I had this perception that the same way as being on stage, as the audience would be judging me, I thought the speaker would be judging me. Well, guess what? When we're up on stage, the people in the audience with us as speakers, they feel the same way. They're not judging you. People are always looking at themselves. And I come to realize that. And I said, wow, this is crazy. I was so worried about people judging me all these years, that it turns out that that every single person I'm talking, unless they're a psychopath, every single person I'm talking to are worried about what other people think about them. Every single person. I don't care if they're a CEO. In fact, the number one reason the CEO would get a coach is because they're worried. They're worried about being found out that they're a fraud, that they don't deserve where they're at. And it's crazy, because you would think that a person who's worth hundreds of millions to $1 billion would have, their mental act together, and they don't. Yeah. And when you're up, so Charles, when you're up on stage speaking, I want you to think about this and turn that mindset around, that every single person in the audience, number one, they want to hear what you have to say. Number two, they're not even going to judge you. Even if you make a mistake on stage, they're judging themselves. And they're probably worried about you looking at them down in the audience. Their heart's probably racing a lot. So from that perspective, let me ask you, how does that make you change your perception?
Well, I mean, it definitely does assist with the nervousness, of course, because when we get on stage, we're nervous, we're jittery. But and I think you talk a little bit about this as well, self-awareness, right? It's becoming aware that, hey, these people are more focused on themselves right now than they are you.
Yes.
So which is the reason why I think, Tony Robbins is such a powerful speaker. He speaks to millions of people, throughout his career. And, and I'm pretty sure probably in his beginning stages, he probably had the same thoughts, getting on stage and these people are looking at me, they're judging what I'm saying. They're counting my ums and my ahs, and they're counting how many times I say your nose and all that stuff. But just having that slight shift, I think, will redirect some of that energy towards what you're trying to put out, as opposed to being concerned what other people are thinking of you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And being nervous on stage is, let's take another way. If you're really calm getting up there, then you're not going to be as effective as if you're a little nervous. I talked to Brian Tracy years ago about 21 years ago. And he told me that he's nervous every single time he goes and does a presentation, every single time. And he's not the only one, because every audience is going to be different. There's going to be slight changes. The venue is going to be different. Even if you're telling the same story over and over again, things are going to be different. And you want to bring your A game as much as possible to your audience. And so there's going to be that slight nervousness, whether or not you're going to do it. Yet, when you make a mistake up there, then you go with it. I remember a presentation that I did, and this is where the mindset shift really has to come in, and improvising as well. So I did a presentation where I was up on stage and I was telling a story, where like there was a higher power and all this kind of stuff, and telling a story of diamonds and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, the mic that I had on me, there was a loud pop over the loudspeaker, and then it went dead. And then I looked around, and then I looked up into the sky, and I said, I don't know what happened, but maybe God didn't like what I was saying. And I just got the biggest laugh at that point in time, which worked. Now, I didn't mean to elicit humor, yet I had to improvise right away, and it worked. Then I just went with it, even without a microphone, because I always practice without a microphone anyway. So I just used my diaphragm and just projected out to the audience and just finished up the presentation. And, it turned out to be one of my best. Had a standing ovation after that point in time. So it was pretty cool. And that was back in 94. So it was a lot of fun.
All right, so let's get back to business here.
Yes.
How long have you been in business?
Okay, so I've been a serial entrepreneur for many years. My latest venture I've been doing it probably for about 15 years. Prior to that, so
let's take that one. Let's just take 15 years for that specific thing, right?
Yes.
How long did you suck in business? And the reason why I'm asking this is because a lot of people, they say 80% of entrepreneurs go out of business in their first 18 months. Yes. And I believe that's all due to a mindset, because I believe that entrepreneurs, they understand, hey, if failure comes, I got to get back up, right? I got to do it again. I just got to do it in a different way. The reason why I'm asking you how long did you suck is because I want to help some aspiring entrepreneur listening to this that is stuck right now in their business. And I want them to understand that you're not good. Entrepreneurship, in most cases, it's a very much learned behavior, right? So how long did you suck at business until you started to get your groove?
Okay, I'm going to go back to even before that. I had an advertising and marketing firm back in the 90s. And when I first started it, as a one-man shop, and I was doing copywriting and everything like that, and working with local businesses. Oh my gosh, I made so many mistakes. Just number one, trying to find clients. And even though, I knew about marketing and I had studied with Jay Abraham and everything, I just had to make so many adjustments. I didn't account for like how much money I was going to need at the beginning. And I learned that, you're going to need many times more just to keep stuff going than what you initially had planned for. So I struggled and at times I didn't eat and everything like that. And I fell on my face. Like, oh gosh, it was just almost every single week. It seems like there was something going down in terms of money and then waiting for clients to pay me. And that took a lot of times I wouldn't get paid for like 6 months, because I was sending out billing and because I had made a lot of promises that I said, if you do this, your business is going like double and triple and everything like this. And so I stuck by my word. I said, you don't have to pay me till this happens. Well, I wasn't getting paid at the beginning a lot. And I ended up having to borrow a lot of money and I went into a lot of debt and just, yet I kept going at it and going at it and going at it and working as many hours, 120 hours a week, just doing something where I was making way less than minimum wage. I mean, way less. And yeah, it's like saying, what the heck? In fact, I was putting in like the 120 hours a week, and I was making less than minimum wage than somebody working 40 hours a week. So I think there was times when I would probably be averaging like 25 to 50 cents an hour at that point in time.
Oh, geez.
I know. Yeah. And I just had to persist at it. And eventually I got to a point because I needed other people. So I would bring other people in because I knew that I could not do it alone. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're trying to do it alone, don't. Find somebody to at least coach you or bring somebody else in. And I learned where my strengths were and I learned where my weaknesses were. And I finally got somebody in that was able to manage where I was more the creative person and the ideas and inspiring and all this kind of stuff. So I need somebody who could do the managing part, where the paperwork and everything else. That helped a lot. Once that happened, once it doubled my effort. Now they were working like a regular job, so they had money, this person, and yet it helped my business to grow a lot. And
now you said the three
golden,
you said the three golden words there. And Og Mandino, who I love, he says that he believes that the three most powerful words in life is ask for help.
Yes.
But it does require a little bit of a mindset shift, right? A paradigm shift with the mindset. A lot of people, especially when they're getting in business, you just mentioned you had to borrow money at a certain point. You had to ask for help. I don't know how to do this. What type, can you thread those two together, asking for help and mindset? Because it's not really easy. Even I struggled with it early on in my career.
Yeah, I think probably what I should have done was going back to the days when I was in the Marines, because I was with First Force Recon. And I knew that at that point in time, if you're going to be successful in a military unit, especially like Force Recon, you can't go all Rambo. The problem especially with men, I think women are a lot easier at doing this. The problem with us guys is that our ego gets in the way. When our ego gets in the way, we think we can do it all. We don't need anybody else. Well, that's a bunch of bull. That's a bunch of bull, because if you're going to be successful in any endeavor, getting help And this is where mind shift comes in. Getting help is going to increase your effectiveness. It's going to make you a better you. Think about it. Michael Jordan, he's probably listed as the greatest basketball player of all times. And he had a coach. He didn't do it alone. In every single instance, even people in individual sports, they had help. The ones that were the most successful had help. They had a team that assisted them, whether that team was one person or multiple people. And as an entrepreneur, to be the best you, to enlist your highest mission where it's going to make the biggest difference, doing it alone, you'll never get there. When you bring in one person, now you're doubling your efforts. You're actually having another person who has the strength where you lack. So they're going to take away a lot of pressure off you, and you can become the best you by unleashing that part of you that you were meant to do in your business. That way you can be more inspired instead of being worn out. And then when your business is down, having that person if you're feeling down, they can help to raise you up, and vice versa. So yes, having that, if you think of it that way, having that mindset, you will become the best you possible. And that's where you start expanding and asking for more and more help. Then it becomes so much easier. I would never ever try to be a one-man operation because it just doesn't work. You're going to go out of business fast if it's just you just doing it.
Yeah. Earlier you alluded to the frontal lobe being the CEO.
Yes.
What is the inner CEO, and how does it help with developing a peak performance mindset?
Yes. So I mentioned ego, and ego is that self and everything. And when we start making decisions, now obviously in sales, we know that people tend to make decisions based on emotions. People will even vote for whoever they're going to vote for the president. They tend to make decisions based on emotions. The problem is that when we let our emotions get in the way, especially negative emotions. So a negative emotion is like a fear, and fear is directly related to anger. So people that tend to be angry have a fear. So what happens with that fear and anger is that we end up not being able to engage our prefrontal cortex. We actually will have a self-imposed lobotomy. So that means that part of our brain is being cut off when we have a negative emotion that happens. So, and I'm going to give a little bit more neuroscience here. So when our amygdala, which is that fight or flight warning system, when that fires off, our brains automatically will send a signal, and this is less than 5/100ths of a second. It sends it all the way down, and adrenaline gets in, and our heart starts pumping really fast, and then we get sent back up, and we will have a reaction. So we may say something, or we may do something that's very reactive. So the inner CEO comes in, and that gets activated when we start having more of a positive emotion. So let's go into the inner CEO. So the inner CEO, our prefrontal cortex, is where our rational thinking occurs. So we start thinking at a higher level at that point in time. And that's what governs our actions. So we don't take reactive. We tend to, so we learn to respond. So how do we access the inner CEO? I mentioned the difference between a positive and negative emotion. So a negative emotion will shut down our inner CEO, and a positive emotion will activate it. So let's think about how we can activate it if you start to feel a negative emotion coming on. And this is where self-awareness comes about. This is where knowing how your body works, not just your thoughts, your physical body. And if you're feeling a negative emotion, and Charles or Demetrius, when you have a feeling of anger or fear, where in your body do you feel it?
I usually feel it in my gut area.
Your gut area?
Yeah.
And Demetrius?
When I have a negative emotion, I typically feel it. I feel it like, I guess in my negative emotion, I would say, I don't know where I feel it actually. It kind of just rings in my head. But I couldn't say where I feel it at.
Okay.
But I know I think about it a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
So I mentioned about the heart really just taking off. And I know we're getting close here. So our heart will start to like going really fast, and it's like going all over the place. So it's like really out of sync. So what you need to do, if you recognize, if you have a feeling, whether it's in your head, your gut, or whatever other part of your body, that negative emotion is coming up, what you want to do is recognize it, tell yourself, stop, take a step back, and then do what's called a rhythmic breathing from the heart. And the way you would do a rhythmic breathing and you focus on your heart is that you're going to do a steady count. So it could be any count. So I'm going to do an example is use it like breathe in for a count of 4. So you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold for a count of 1, exhale for a count of 6, hold, and just keep repeating it, focusing on the heart. And that way your heart gets into a state of coherence. So it's not like all over the place. It's now starts to get in sync. And then once that happens, then you elicit a positive emotion. And when you elicit the positive emotion, you feel it through your body. And once you do that, you feel that positive emotion through your body. Only then will you re-engage. Now your inner CEO will come about. So instead of reacting, you're now able to respond, getting to that higher thinking and making a good decision. And that's really important, because a lot of people think that our thoughts, because it's been talked for a lot of years, our thoughts lead to our behavior, which leads to results. The problem is that's only half of it. So if you think of an iceberg, so at the top of the iceberg are the results. At the surface level of the water is the behavior. Right below the surface is your thoughts or your thinking. Below that is a feeling. Below the feeling is your emotions. Below your emotions is your physiology. Now, Tony Robbins has talked about the physiology of excellence, which used to be an NLP technique and strategy, which is not being taught in NLP anymore. When you change your physiology, you can change your emotions. And what are emotions? Emotions are energy in motion. It means the electrical energy, the hormones and everything flowing to your body. Feelings are just a verbal representation of your emotions, which lead to your thinking, then your behavior, then your results. So you want to do the breathing is accessing that physiology and being able to change it and elicit the positive emotions versus the negative emotions that you had.
That's powerful. Bob, have you heard of Mantak Chia? Are you familiar with him?
I recognize the name. I have not read.
Mantak. And so this may come way out of left field, but it sounds like what you're saying is something similar to the work that he does as well. He has this thing called the 6 healing sounds, and pretty much what the six healing sounds does, there's certain poses that you do and certain noises you make with your mouth which stimulate certain organs in the body, and it the premise behind it is that that the negative emotions are stored within certain organs of the body. For example, like the lungs will store fear. So if you're in a state of fear, there may be like some type of shallow breathing and whatnot. So the purpose of the exercises is when you do the exercises, you energize the lungs and you actually release those negative emotions. So is that something similar to where like the organs store these negative emotions, or is that like completely out of left field?
No, actually, you're right in a way. Let's go back to the heart. The reason I talk about breathing rhythmically through the heart, and there's a big reason, and there's a neurobiological reason to that. A lot of people don't realize that our heart is actually a brain. Now, you said you have a lot of feelings, the feeling of like, or the fear and everything in your gut, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So our gut is known as our second heart. It's the enteric nervous system. And that's where most of the serotonin in our body is produced down in the gut. In fact, the latest estimates is about 500 million neurons down in your gut.
Jeez.
Yeah. Our heart also has a lot of neurons. And it's also, it produces hormones. In every single chamber of the heart, there's serotonin produced there too. So we think about the heart and in a node. So every time the heart sends out a pulse. So think about like you holding a tennis ball and you're just grasping that tennis ball, squeezing it. So that's what your heart does, and it does about 100,000 times a day. It does that every single time, and I mentioned that it produces hormones, so serotonin, and it also produces two other hormones, which lately has been found to be very effective in reducing pancreatic cancer. And this has been done, there's a recent research that came out of Europe regarding that. So it produces hormones. Now, the heart also produces electricity, which is about 60 times more powerful than electricity produced in our brain. And and every time it squeezes, the heart, it produces an electromagnetic pulse. And that pulse is about 5,000 more times powerful than the electromagnetic field in our brain. So every time your heart beats, it sends out a pulse wave, an electromagnetic force, anywhere from a few feet, and it's been estimated to as much as 50 feet away from your body. And when your heart is out of coherence, when it's really messed up, it affects every single organ in your body. So that's the reason it's very important. Like the breathing and everything is all part of that. The rhythmic breathing, in order to get your heart down in sync, which will also get all your other organs in sync. Because our whole body is a system, and a heart is a big part of that system. A lot of people don't think about that. So when you're stressed, your system gets out of sync. So your other organs get affected. And that's the reason, like you mentioned, like with this breathing and thinking about like that and the other organs, it's very important to always go from the heart to get your organs in sync, and you'll be much healthier and being able to think clearer too on top of that. So your body gets in sync, your brain gets in sync, and when you're in sync, those closest to you will feel it too. Again, let's go back to the speaking that we talked about earlier. When you're in sync as a presenter and you're just getting into a state of flow, your audience will feel it and they will have that same feeling back and forth. And when you're out of sync, the audience will feel that too. And they'll kind of pull away. As an entrepreneur, if you have your team with you or if you're working with clients, you want to make sure that you're in sync. That's the reason doing the rhythmic breathing before you go in to any kind of meeting or doing any kind of deal or anything that you're doing, even if you're just sitting at your computer and doing what you're doing, even if you're building websites, I don't care what you're doing as an entrepreneur, get into that rhythmic breathing. You're going to get much more into it, and you're going to stay in that state of flow and be much happier and healthier and more effective in what you do.
But what's the proper way to breathe? Because there's a lot of misconceptions out there, right? They say, you're supposed to breathe into your gut is supposed to expand when you're breathing.
Yeah.
Is that the correct way to breathe?
Yeah. So that is that'll help to get you calm if you do what's called diaphragmatic breathing. And I tell people to do that. What's really important is you focus on your heart. Focus breathing through your heart. You're going to start naturally getting deeper into breathing when you're breathing naturally. Focus on your heart first, because a lot of people don't talk about it. They talk about deep breathing, the diaphragmatic breathing, and that's important, yet not as important as really focusing on your heart, because your heart's really key. And I didn't think about this until I looked into read a lot of research into getting to a state what's called coherence. So coherent, having your heart in a state of coherence. That's very, very important. It'll affect you as a leader when your heart's out of coherence or incoherence. It'll affect those around you. It'll affect the decisions that you make as an entrepreneur. Yet when you're in that state of coherence, oh my gosh, things are just going to be so much better. You're going to be able to see things clear. Even if you make a mistake, you're not going to knock yourself down for it. You're going to be able to make adjustments. If your business is not going the way it's going, if you're state of coherence, you're going to be able to pivot and see things. You're going to be able to pivot a lot faster instead of trying to hold on to something that's not working, yet your irrational self says, I'm just going to stay with it. I'm going to stay with it. I'm going to stay with it, instead of doing a necessary pivot. And I think that's where, if you remember the app Bourbon, you guys remember that app?
No.
Okay. So Bourbon was a geolocation app that came out, and they had all the bells and whistles and all this kind of stuff. And people were really confused with it. They used one feature all the time. So they would check in, and there's a feature where they can post, so they can take pictures and post it like where they're at in the location. So they started posting pictures. So the founders of Bourbon made a decision that they're going to scrap their app. And they went back to the drawing board, and they focused on that one feature. And through their pivot of that, they were able to take Bourbon and turn it into an app where they ended up selling it 18 months later for $1 billion. Can you guess which app? You probably use it all the time. I do.
It's not.
It was bought by Facebook.
Instagram.
Oh, wow.
Instagram?
Starts with an I.
Instagram?
Instagram, yes. Instagram. So the founders learned to pivot. They understood that what wasn't working. And they found what works, what people were really interested in. And that's where, when you're in sync, when you're in a state of coherence, you're going to be more aware of your market and what they really want. And that's really important. Because as an entrepreneur, if you're creating something that your market doesn't want, then you're going to fail. So I think having yourself in a state of coherence, being aware, you opening up, understanding your prefrontal cortex, that inner CEO, you're going to be able to make much better decisions. You can be more mindful, and eventually the goal is to reach that no limit thinking and having that higher sense of meaning. And that's where having a state of that peak performance mindset eventually will culminate, is at a higher meaning. But yet you need to address all these other things and make sure that inner CEO is working. And the only way that's going to work is making sure that you're in a state of coherence.
That's huge. That's huge. I wish we had hours, man. You just unloaded a lot of great stuff a lot of the stuff that you talked about. Of course, we particularly have interest in. Of course, our audience definitely would be in entrepreneurs. So what we're going to do now is, Bob, what I want to do is have you on for a part 2.
Okay.
If you're willing to have you on for a part 2 and unpack some of the stuff that you mentioned about the breathing technique, getting in coherence, because I really think that's very applicable, as you just alluded to, into business, but also into relationships and the health. So I think it'll definitely be something that we can unpack a little further. But Demetrius, I'm going to throw it over to you for any final remarks.
Well, I actually had 2 questions. Would it be okay if I ask Bob 2 questions?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so the first one is I was extremely fascinated with the summit of Mount Everest. And the summit of Mount Everest is actually something I got so fascinated with the research, and I just kept going in because it really has a lot to do with mindset. I think it's one of the most amazing things a human being can do. I actually put a little bit in my silver dollar ebook, right? One fascinating thing I found about it, Bob, was they say that 80% of the people who die on Mount Everest die on their way down.
Yes.
And I believe life is really simple. I believe that if we look close enough, we can actually see that it's very simple and almost everything is very parallel. And I found that that's the same way, whether it's in business or in corporate America. You'll see somebody who is going for a job, right? And they'll say, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to get this job. I got to get this job. I'm going to get this job. They'll go into the interview and they're going to get this job. And then they're there for 5, 10, 15 years and they never make a promotion, never move forward, never do anything. Then you have somebody else that goes into that same interview and they say, you know what? I'm going to get in management with this company. I'm going to own this company. And most of the time, that same thing happens. So I say all of that to say we typically get what we want, what we think about. Do you believe that to be true as far as a lot of people, they're setting themselves up for failure as far as anything that they do?
Yeah.
I just want to be a parent. Right? And they're just a mediocre parent. Sometimes they become absent parents, but they're still parents. What do you think about mindset starting at the end, and then working their way backwards?
Yes. So, very good point. Beginning with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey talks about. And I had mentioned this to a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs especially, and just about everybody. When you can see that point where you want to get to, and that's where having the mindset, the mission-oriented mindset, because you're able to see that part. And you mentioned thinking. I like to go a little bit deeper because I mentioned emotions and feelings and everything like that and physiology. Not only will you think it, if you're going out 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out, and you see that mission, that greater purpose, that end goal that you want, and then you backtrack it. When you're out there, not only should you think it, you should actually feel it in your whole body. Just embody the emotions throughout. Because if you don't have that, then you're not going to fully embrace it. In fact, the most successful people tend to do that. They have such a belief that they feel it in their whole being as if it's happening. And then when you have that, then you backtrack because you can see it clearly. So you backtrack it all the way back to the present. And when you do that, then you in essence, you have a roadmap. Now, is a roadmap going to be perfect? No, because you may have that roadmap and know, you know where the end point is, yet you're still going to have the obstacles. But embracing your whole body, and you see it as a mission, you see it as a greater purpose, that end goal, you're going to be able now to get through the obstacles. So if you're going into a business and a person that that they're weak in terms of their thinking, and they really don't know what they want anyway, and they go into it and nothing happens. They're going to be stuck. Yet the person that will go in and they see themselves not only in upper level management or in a C-suite, they may see them as a CEO or chairman, or even acquiring the company at that point in time, or even going out and they reach a certain point and then they go out and they build something even better than where they came from. So especially if they're mission oriented, they're going to go there and then they rise to a higher level. And when they have that in mind, when they feel it through the whole body and they believe it, the thoughts are going to come naturally when they feel it. And then nothing's going to stop them. Nothing. No challenges, no people that they're going to get in their way. Even if somebody says something to them, they're just going to brush it off and keep moving forward and keep moving forward and keep moving forward. And I'm glad that you mentioned Mount Everest, because a good friend of mine, he's going to be doing a summit. He's actually from Brazil, a friend, Rodrigo, and he's going to be he's going to do Mount Everest, and he's going to do it without oxygen. So he's been training really, 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 really hard. Well, yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's huge. That's really huge. Yeah.
All right. So my last question would be, you mentioned earlier that you coach a lot of CEOs. I was on your website, bobchoat.com, and I was curious to know, you did make it a point, obviously, to say that you coach CEOs. I'm very curious to know, do you coach aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are not established, that want to be in business, they have a desire to be in business?
Yes.
Or must you be established to work with you?
In fact, I've had coached entrepreneurs or people that have wanting to pivot from where they're at in terms of the business. Maybe they feel their business has stagnated, or they even have lost passion, or really wasn't even their passion. So in essence, they're having to start all over. One of my clients, he's was like that, and initially I brought him. He brought me in, and I met him on a hike, and I gave him my card. He didn't call me until I think it was like 5-6 years later, and he remembered what I told him and everything. So he called me because he had this fear of his business. He had reached a certain level, and because it was a fear of making too much money, and I had to break him through that fear. And the fear was because his baseline was $5,000 a month, and then he made $10,000, and that scared him because that was above what he was used to. So I had to retrain his brain to the point. So in a few months, he went from that $10,000 to $100,000 a month, and yet he wasn't happy doing that. So we ended up doing a side business, building up another business where he wanted to teach and everything what he knew in terms of what he was doing, especially as an internet marketer. And he had fear of speaking in public and everything like that. And well, he got to the point where he became a leader in his community, and he got looked up to, and in the Asian culture, because he's from Asia. He went from these elders where he looked up to him, where all these elders now look up to him. And that really changed his whole perception of himself. His parents changed their perception of him because they always thought he was a loser because he didn't graduate from college. He was a college dropout and everything. And yet he took himself to the next level and became a leader. And he's doing quite well now. And he still has his old business, but yet he has his new venture as well. And that's just one example. So, yes, able to take the rising entrepreneur, the person who doesn't know what they really want, because they may be focused, like I said before, they may want to make a certain amount of money or they may want a certain amount of power. I help to shift that towards getting to think about being mission oriented. Again, I'm a mission oriented person myself in terms of everything I do. I mean, my mission is to inspire and help as many people, entrepreneurs, CEOs, business people, and likewise as much as possible. And I come from that mission oriented from when I was in the Marines and everything like that. And every single entrepreneur, young or old, it doesn't matter because age is irrelevant to me. Because, we know the story of Colonel Sanders, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
Or the story of Grandma Moses. You know about her? You ever
Grandma
hear of her?
Moses?
Grandma Moses.
No, not
yeah,
Grandma
so Grandma
Moses.
Moses is an artist. And she was a folk artist. And Grandma Moses, because people talk about Colonel Sanders and everything like that. Grandma Moses, she had a love of art. Yeah, she got married when she was young. She had her kids. She raised them and everything like that. She lost track of her art and everything. And she finally found it again to the point where she became one of the most celebrated artists of her time. She got to see world leaders, and her artwork was on greeting cards. She actually became very wealthy in terms of what she did and focusing on that as her mission, because that was her passion. It was her passion. And if you ever get a chance, you're allowed to go Google Grandma Moses. And she started her career at the age of 78. She started at 78 years old, a career that lasted all the way basically to the day she died at 101. And she got to see world leaders all over. Times Square took her down. She had a ticker tape parade and everything. So age has nothing to do with it. I know entrepreneurs. Yeah. There was a young guy in New York City who started a web development company in junior high, and that became a high six-figure company for him. So it's at all ages.
All right. Well, I just added you on Instagram here, Bob Choat, and it's kind of interesting. You know who Robin Sharma is? You guys resemble each other. That's the last thing I wanted to say, and both of you guys are awesome.
I'm a lot older than him, though.
You. Yeah, but just as powerful, man. Your message and your content, I gained a lot, and I'm sure Chuck did as well. So
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
This is a lot of fun. And I hope I delivered enough content today for you guys.
Yeah, you, Chuck, you want to? I'm not Chuck.
He's still here.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Did you just Google Grandma Moses?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, she's amazing, and she's just one of many that started late in life, and we know of all these young people from kids starting building new apps or whatever and becoming wealthy the instant. Yet, as Gary Vee talks about, it's not an overnight process, and there will be a lot of struggles, and you just got to work at it. And you got to believe in it, and you follow that mission and that passion. And that's very, very important.
Yeah, that's and that's huge. Like following your passion, and there's so much. And I wish we had more time, but I really do, man, because you've unpacked so much information, man, and it's really inspiring. And it's funny because I was listening to a Tony Robbins audio this morning, and he was talking about a guy that he knows who started lifting. I think the guy's 80 or probably in the 70s, and he started lifting about 6 years ago. And the guy bench presses 450 pounds, and he only started lifting in his 60s. So I think one of the things that you alluded to when you were talking about Grandma Moses was that, there's really no excuse, right?
There's no excuse. And again, age has nothing to do with it. One of my friends, Ernestine Shepherd, if you ever Google her, she's been on TV and she's listed in the Guinness's Book of World Record as the world's oldest bodybuilder. If you look at her, in fact, I want you to Google Ernestine Shepherd. Yeah. Now tell me if she's not amazing at 80 years old.
Oh, she's 80. Ernestine Shepherd, there she is.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. I've seen her stuff. I've seen her stuff across social media.
Yeah, and there's another lady that I want you to look up. Her name is Wendy Ida, IDA, and she holds the Guinness Book of World Records for most burpees by women in 1 minute. She did 36 burpees in 1 minute. And she did it at the age of 60. She's 64 now. And both of them are friends of mine, by the way. And look at Wendy Ida. Now tell me if she's not hot.
Looking good naked after 40.
Wendy Ida. Yeah, I'm looking at her now.
64.
Oh yeah, wow. And how old is she? Jeez. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. Oh man.
So age is not an excuse.
Perfect.
You got to put in the effort. Yeah. You got to put in the effort, and you got to continually to put in the effort. It's not an overnight game. It just keep going it. I've been doing parkour for almost 6 years now. Yes.
Parkour?
And I'm a year older than Wendy Ida.
I've heard of hardcore. I heard
parkour. You see these young kids.
No, parkour. That's when you're jumping off buildings and.
Oh, parkour. Oh, that's the parkour. Okay, yes. Okay, that's the parkour. Okay.
So I do like a lot of bar work, like you see the bar guys do. I do a lot of that stuff, and and if you go like even on my Instagram, you scroll down, you can see me doing plyometric push-ups. I did it at my friend Gearhart's. We're doing a peak performance mindset workshop. So there's a video that's showing me doing. It's farther down, but you'll see it. That was in San Francisco. So I do a lot of plyo push-ups. Where you throw your arms out in front of you or clapping or whatever like that. And a lot of times when I'm on stage, when I'm speaking, I would do a lot of physical demonstrations because people will understand it. That's a mindset issue. When people think you're a certain age, you can't do stuff. So I would do a lot of demos. So they get it.
Yeah, and it challenges them, right? They're while you're on stage and you're doing these exercises, like, well, this guy's he's in his 60s, and what excuse do I have in my 30s, right? So, definitely, it's definitely a game changer seeing I don't want to refer you guys as elders, but seeing people that are in their 50s and their 60s and their 70s perform these physical feats that we once thought were impossible at that age. So cool stuff. So Bob, we're going to start winding down here. It's been an hour and a half, man. Like I said, I wish we can unpack more. Where can people go to find more information about you?
bobchoat.com. And I'm about to finish the launching of my course on mindhackacademy.tv. They can also go to mindsetscience.com. I'm going to be putting together a workshop to help people to learn about the peak performance mindset. And then if you're in the Los Angeles area on November 14th, I'm going to be speaking at the Pound 140 conference founded by Jeff Pulver, who's also the founder of Vonage. So that's going to be an exciting event. It's going to be at the Crest Theater in Westwood. And that's close to Westwood Boulevard and Wilshire Boulevard down in Los Angeles. And I plan on having numerous other workshops, so you can get in touch with me, and I hope to see you around. Not only to one of the workshops, or if you're in the LA area, just come and give me a ring down there, and we'll get together.
Awesome. And we'll have the information in the show notes so people can have easy access to it, as well as your social media and your website as well, so people can reach out to you.